No, really what I wanted to do in this short session here, I'm the director of indoor events, so I want to talk a little bit about the championships and where they've come from and where they're going and how they get there. And then the second thing, but through like Lauren's talk and others, sparked a few things, because in a lot of the things that he talked about, I saw myself only just 20 years earlier. In about 1992, I opened a facility and was a club director, had been doing that for a while and been renting facilities, doing all the things that a lot of you were doing. And just eventually got tired of having a team go to a middle school gym and find that there's an art fair going on and that we can't practice. And so we were always beholden to someone else. And so we took the initial step and got a warehouse, and it wasn't very good. But it put us on the map. And you know, it was real hard work, and then we got into another facility. But I came to volleyball in '99 and had been doing the facility, and we were in the other one. And one of the reasons why I switched was one of the things that Lauren talked about was family and everything else. I mean, things changed. I had to make some hard decisions, and I had 2 young kids at the time, and was going, I just can't stay at the gym all weekend long, from 6 a.m. on Saturday morning until 10 p.m. on Sunday night, cleaning the toilets on Saturday night at the end of an adult tournament before the junior tournament starts on Sunday, sleeping on 2 team benches pushed together. I just couldn't do that anymore. And while it was rewarding and a great experience, and I wouldn't have traded it for anything at that time, it is reality. And maybe I wasn't the smartest, but you guys from Impact, coach smarter, not harder. And there were some things I wasn't very smart at, so I had to do harder to make up for that. And that's okay. That's just a fact of life, and everyone has to do that. But one thing I would recommend, and it's kind of a no-brainer, and I did graduate with a business education degree, which I used a lot of those things to my benefit, but a business plan is critical. And if you're going into that facility knowing what you've got to do without a plan, you're setting yourself up to fail. And basic things like making sure that you can cover your nut, cover your expense with known income, whether it's a club, whether it's a contract with your region or a hospital or whatever it is. But if you go in there thinking, I'll be able to fill that Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. slot with, I'll find something. Punch your ticket. Don't do it, because you're setting yourself up to fail. And in that fall period, when all those kids are playing high school volleyball or junior high or whatever it is, you've got to have known income at that time. I mean, if you've got it in with a clinic, but I'd say get that in writing before you sign that document with the bank. The first facility we had was a warehouse. The second one we built, but the bank required that we put garage doors in. Why do you think that was? They can turn it into a warehouse. Exactly. There were loading docks there. Because back in the early 90s, there wasn't hardly any history of any of these type facilities. So they were hedging their bets, and I certainly don't blame them for it. At some point, we came into a reality of we could collect more income off of outside groups paying rent than we could go back to that middle school occasionally and still rent their gym for a lower rate. So we had a hard philosophical decision to make. Do we send our own club team still back to that school in order to charge more for rent? And we did at times. But it was simply a cost analysis, cash flow, whatever you want to call it. It was a business decision at that time. And that also, I mean, the club kids don't drive a lot of other things like concession stands as much for practice as what an outside group coming in and playing hospital rec league type volleyball might. So there's all those things that you gotta consider. I know you showed hands, but how many of you guys are in a private facility right now? And how many of you are leasing it? How many of you own it or basically paying? So everyone else, and those of you that aren't, hopefully you've had a chance to look around, because at some point I'm sure it's crossed your mind. Do we want to go down that path? Ask them. Ask them, because I'd be shocked if they weren't willing to share their pluses and their minuses, their errors and their successes, so that you're not recreating the wheel. Because things aren't that much different from Boise to Indianapolis to Baltimore or wherever you are. Okay? All right. So from a juniors standpoint, one of the biggest changes that have come onto the landscape, and it's been this year, is breaking out of the 18s. And I know probably most of you are not 18s coaches because they were at this event last weekend. But I'm sure you're aware we pulled the Open, the National, and the USA divisions out of the customary summer JNCs and moved them to the last weekend in April, and that event is in Milwaukee. That was a process that went on for about 3 years of discussions. So it was first kind of floated out there, and there was back and forth feedback, and it was floated to the junior division and the commissioners group, the RVA. All right. So it wasn't just a knee-jerk reaction, hey, let's do this. One thing I will admit is that my daughter was going through, and she graduated last year, and as she went through the club thing, she played 18, so I had the opportunity to be able to talk to other coaches, talk to other parents, and just kind of ask people, what do you think about this? What's going on? And there's a number of things, but one of the tipping points was a couple of years ago when she was 18s, and we were playing the Rocky Mountain Region Regionals, which was in mid-April. And at the end of the tournament, the team that we played at the end of the tournament, they came up and gave all our kids hugs. And they've never done that before, and we played them a few times. And they're going, what's going on? It goes, oh, our season's done. This was our last event. It's mid-April. Oh, yeah, we're done. And our kids, wow. And our parents going, wow, wouldn't that be nice? So it was those type things that kind of pushed us to think about that. We surveyed, after the junior championships a couple years ago, we surveyed the participants and asked them, the 18s participants, goes, okay, and this was parents, club directors, coaches, whomever wanted to answer the survey. Out of everyone that responded, about 60 to 70% of the club directors were not in favor of the move. About 70 to 75% of the parents were in favor of the move. Okay? So when we first announced that this was going to happen, there were some club directors that literally thought the sky was falling. This is the worst thing that could ever happen. And there were a number of people that were against it. So knowing that, I mean, all of you are club directors, and I'm sure a few of you are parents and can kind of play the difference. Why do you think the club directors were that opposed to this plan? Which means what? Less income. Okay, it's a different business model. You got to charge this team different than you charge everyone else. What are we going to do with those 18s coaches, which often are our better coaches in the club, when they're done at the end of April? Okay, so that was it. And those are all very valid things to think about. But we gave them 2 years to work on it, well, a year and a half. But we also, the regions had to adjust. We had to have a new qualifier system. The regions had to run their qualifiers at different times. There were a lot of different things that had to be worked out. And my confidence, and I think it bared out, all of those people, including you all, are smart people and you've got time to figure it out and you'll make good decisions. And there were some that said, well, we're gonna choose to go this path, and if it means going to different tournaments, we're gonna do that, and that's okay. But I would just, and it wasn't trying to be threatening or glib or anything else, I just said, 70 to 75% of those people and those parents are wanting to do this. And if you push your way down that other path and there's another club over here that's providing a better product, just be careful and know what decisions you're making. All right? In this linear thing, and Doug may talk a little bit about this, but in the ideal world, the families are kind of directing the clubs on what they should do with their product, and the clubs should be kind of directing the regions on what they're doing with their product, and then the regions are directing national, and that's kind of what every division that we've done in the girls' championships, not just the 18s, but adding the USA division, adding the 12 and unders, whatever it is driven off the wishes of the clubs and the regions. The one thing that we've heard this before, we heard again this morning, the question came up about 11 unders. Yeah, we could add 11 unders. But that's one of the areas that we're holding true with, and actually it's kind of a vocal minority, so it hasn't passed. And even if it did, we would probably push back a little bit harder on that one, because I would much rather add divisions in the areas if we had room, say 14s, 15s, 16s. So virtually every change that we're making is a push from the membership. As I've told our staff, we're running your tournament, you're not playing in our tournament. Okay. Now, how does the qualifier system fit into this? With the 18s, we had to do new things. But the qualifiers in general are their own events, which are sanctioned by us, and we have a license agreement. And the primary area that we control is the competitive format. Okay, so we don't tell them how much they're going to charge. We don't tell them what their housing format is. We don't tell them a number of things as far as they joke about what color pencils they have to use. But we say it's a 3-day event. For the Opens, you got to have 3 rounds and possibly a playoff and all those things. So we control that aspect so it's consistent. Okay, where we're going with the 18s, we have committed to stay this path, what we're doing in 16 through 2017. And then, but we have to make a decision because of facilities and other things this coming May on what's going to happen in 2018 and beyond. The rumblings that we're hearing right now, I mean, in the last 2 days, I've heard from 2 separate regions that are saying we're having a hard time having teams accept 18 and under bids because they don't want, how come we're the ones that have to play in July? So they're going pretty far down their depth chart, as opposed to the other way. We did hear from one region yesterday that was concerned about the fact that they've got a lot of school activities on that one weekend, and it's conflicting with whether they want to play in the April event or not. So, and that's valid. I mean, people have said there's qualifiers on that weekend. However, you can pick and choose what qualifiers you play in. And if that's a bad weekend, you just don't play in that one. You go to another one. But if it's the championships, you got to make a hard decision there. Okay. Any questions about the 18th thing? All right. The field sizes, if we were to go a different direction and pull some 18s out, as we did this year, we're expanded the American, for example, this year to 64. And that's because of the room made by pulling the 18s out. So we can play a little bit with the field sizes, but we're committed. We have to have the event stay about the same size so that we are fulfilling our commitment to the cities that are the host sites. So that's where that's going to go. It's not going to get a whole lot bigger because we're already kind of growing out of certain cities. But the field sizes are going to stay about the same. There are any questions on the junior championships? Because there's a few other things. Perfect. A lot of you know about that there are more and more independent events popping up. Triple Crown, for example. And there is a lot of areas of the country where facility owners have their own insurance, and so they're just going together and running events that are not USAV sanctioned, they're not AAU sanctioned, they're just self-insured and they're self-sanctioned. And I don't think there's really necessarily a whole lot wrong with that. The only thing I would warn you as a club director, if you're going to one of these independent events, that you make sure you understand what the insurance package is. The club that my daughter played for went to one of these events a few years ago, and I went to the club director and I said, you really need to inform the parents on that team that's going to that event that they may not have sport accident, which is covered by USA Volleyball. I'm not sure that event had it. I don't know if they did or didn't, but I'm sure that the parents that sent their kids to that tournament assumed that they had it. And they just need to make informed decisions on that. So those are things that if you start venturing off into other areas, which I'm not saying you shouldn't, but if you do, just make sure that you're informed as well as you can and you're informing your parents as well as you can. Okay, one of the questions that keeps coming up, and this is from more a region standpoint, but I know that it's getting more and more contentious, is the whole issue over recruiting. And I think one of our morning guys talked about that, recruiting between clubs and also the tryout season. More and more clubs and more regions seem to be having tryouts in August or before the high school season starts, which means that they're having to commit further and further. I don't know necessarily the right or the wrong way on this. It frustrates me because the whole college recruiting puts pressure on the kids, and to have club directors or club decision putting that much pressure on the kids is really hard. I contend that if you run a good club, it recruits itself. And if you've got an athlete who is unhappy or being recruited away by someone else, then you've got to, again, get into a philosophical area. How is my club going to be without this player? Even if they're the best player on your club, if they're going to be unhappy, that's going to make for an unhappy team and a bad experience for a lot more. And I feel that it's good to let them go. And hopefully they find out that what they had was pretty darn good, and they're going to come back. Years ago, I was running a club. I had a kid do that. They jumped to our competitors' club. We let them go. And our coaches were saying, you're not going to let her back, are you? I said, absolutely, I'm going to let her back. Because her parents are going to be the best recruiters we have. Because they're going to find out it was okay where we were. In fact, it was better where they went. And they did come back, and they were great. So, again, it's a region by region thing, but it's something I think you really need to try to impress upon people to take their foot off the gas a little bit on that. Yes, ma'am.
I come from northern Colorado, and almost every single club in our area had tryouts in July and August. We decided to hold off on our tryouts, just hoping that we would still get kids there. We ended up with about 150 kids in the gym and ended up with 10 teams. So, waiting until October, November worked out for us. And we actually have 3 12s, 3 14s, 1 13, 1 15, 1 16, and 18. But we kind of felt like we still really got some pretty good athletes even waiting that long, so it worked out for us.
I'm glad to hear it worked out, and I commend you for kind of sticking to your guns on that, because as you all know, it's one club that's going to move their date earlier, and then they go, oh, we can't let them get the jump on those kids, and so it's just a one-upping. And at some point, again, the families are going to go, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to choose this path. Yes, sir. There's a...
Maybe from just a slightly different perspective. We chose to, 3 years ago, we chose to do tryouts in the summer. The reason why we did it is if a kid joins our program in July, we can spread their payments out over 9 to 10 months instead of over the course of 4 months. And so it makes club volleyball less financially exclusive then. That was the 100% of the reason why we did it. We don't get, we get great kids in our program. Sometimes a lot of the best athletes in our area don't come to our program. The best volleyball players, they go to other programs. So it was never meant to be a decision based on getting that kid before she tries out somewhere else. It was about giving more kids more opportunity to play because they could spread the huge cost of club volleyball out over a longer period of time. So just a different perspective.
Yeah, and I think that plays into your clear philosophy of what your club is about, and you're not afraid to share that. I'm going to adjust the way I do it to try to get those best kids. And I think, and you talked about it earlier, if you're publishing what those philosophies are and people are making informed decisions, then I applaud that. And I think your reasoning is real good. But if it's simply a reaction to go, oh, they're going to do that, so I've got to do that, yeah, it's a little dangerous at times. So again, I mean, that's great, and I commend you for sticking to what your philosophy is as well. I mean, that's really kind of what I wanted to throw out at you a little bit. If anyone has any other questions about the championships or the process or where it's going, or I'm going to be around at the end, or you can shoot it out now. Otherwise, Mr. Beal.